about the issues surrounding diversity here in Ghana, and they also appear to be old students of Achimota School, the pioneer of education in Ghana, and everybody would love to be there, and we are privileged to have two of their old students to come to help us discuss this issue. And of course, somebody out there is now connecting the dots and trying to figure out exactly what's going to look like. But hold your horses. We'll get to that, and when the discussion unfolds. So share the broadcast, and I would like you to stick and stay right there as we take a few minutes and then help to discuss even further the matter. So stick and right there, share the broadcast, and then we'll be back with a discussion. Right. So, like I said, I've got two guests for tonight, and let me quickly thank you all for taking the opportunity to share our broadcast. We are particularly grateful for the incredible stuff that you do for iTalks, and then making iTalks reach out to the very lens that it's gotten to up till this time. And we are particularly grateful to many people that work behind the scenes to make things work for us directly and indirectly. I would like to introduce my guest for tonight to you all. And the first person I'm going to mention is Mrs. Christine Forstvet Mills, who is the founder and director of the Forstvet Mills Consultancy. And Mrs. Christine Mills is an expert, in behavior change, and then formative research and environmental sustainability and climate change, building resilience in that regards as far as climate change is concerned. So she is well endowed in her ability and in knowledge. And of course, our second guest is Mr. Tete, who is a fashion designer and whose collection is used in many of the movies that you see across Africa, and then of course many of the people who use his products across Europe, and so basically internationally he's quite recognized. And I would like to bring them on now onto iTalk so that we can delve into the matter of discussion for tonight. So welcome, Mr. Tetepla and Mrs. Christine Forstvet Mills.
Hello, Bernard.
Hello, 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 hello. Good to
Can you
see
hear me?
you. Good to see you. Yes, I can. And good to see you,
Hello,
Mrs.
hello, Bernard.
Mills. And you all looking amazing and shining. And I believe that today we're gonna have quite a very interesting discussion here. Now, let me just put this across to our viewers out there that here in iTalks we hold constructive discussions aimed towards progress and whatever the opinions of our guest is subjected to them, and then not in any conflict of anything, but just their opinions, and just to help us move our society to where it's going and it's supposed to be, because we believe that after 64 years of independence and trying to bridge the gap and develop our nation, we would get to this kind of moment where matters would be discussed involving diversity and what is it actually all about. So my first question is to basically bring to light. Now I'll put this to you because ladies first all the time, and Mrs. Mills. So bring us to speed what diversity is all about to you.
Thank you so much, Bernard. I'm really honoured to be here this evening with you both. I think for me, when we talk about diversity in our society and in terms of where we would like Ghana to be, I think diversity to me means richness. It means having lots of different kind of viewpoints, lots of different options. It means the maximum amount of creativity. It means changing paradigms, examining the way that we're doing things, and looking at how we evolve as a society. So for me, diversity is a positive thing. It's something that we should and can encourage in children to welcome, and it can only lead to better things for Ghanaian society at large, you know.
Yeah, certainly. And your view on that, Mr. Tete, what do you make of what Mrs. Mills have just said regarding diversity? And if you want to add even further, we would appreciate that.
Yeah, honestly, I would have echoed exactly what she said. And I'll just add a bit to it that, well, I believe we must be very liberal, you know, in that way we will be able to accept certain standards and certain core values of things that will change and improve our way of living, you know. But if we are, or if we become so consumed in certain things and certain structures that we believe in without actually reviewing how beneficial those structures are to us, then we are not actually going to generate any positivity out of it, you know. So, I mean, in a nutshell, I believe we must be very liberal in accepting what goes on around us and how Bernard's side.
Just Bernard, yeah.
Oh, just
Sorry.
Bernard, okay.
Sorry, I think there was a little bit of the bandwidth of the internet sometimes drops, so just have to find. So apologies for that, and viewers, if you just lost the link, it's just due to the low bandwidth on the internet, but then that is sorted now, so we can quickly continue the discussion. Yes. Right. So basically, the underlying case, you know, pertaining to a student who was basically, you know, rejected or was asked to cut his hair. Now, before I even get into that specific, what constitutes a reasonable limitation? You know, when it comes to the purpose of education or access to education, what constitutes a reasonable limitation, you know, when it comes to the purpose of education and access to education? Who's going to take that first?
I'll take it if you don't mind, Christine.
No, please go ahead.
Reasonable is very relative when it comes to education, to be honest. And any institution can adjudge its own status or standards based on their core values and things they believe in, and that will determine what they lay out as their rules and regulations to be followed. In the case of Achimota School, where we've both been, we know there are actually strict rules and regulations that are used to shape the students to become what they become in the future. You accept that Achimota has actually churned out quite a number of reputable people in society, and these are people who have actually conformed to these strict rules and regulations over the period of time and have become what they become in society. So it becomes a bit challenging for Achimota School to believe or take some of these rules out of context and just twist them around to favor just any individual that comes in, because they believe that, look, this is how we've worked like this over the period of time, and it's worked for us, and it's actually brought out really reputable people in society. So why will we change it, or why will we suddenly twist it for someone we don't even know much about, or someone we don't know? In a way, I do feel that, well, there could be changes. I mean, laws do change over the period of time, rules do change over the period of time. Modernization actually affects these rules, and they can be tweaked and twisted to actually conform to the new system or the new environment, basically. We can't be so hooked up on the past so much that we find it really difficult to actually amend rules to go with or to conform with new lifestyle, basically.
So I mean, if I understand you perfectly, are you saying that the rules that govern these decisions as far as educational institutions are concerned are subjective to the educational institutions, and that they can decide to do it the way they want, or it has to conform to a national constitution that indicates or stipulates that there is that kind of liberty and access-free education, basically?
Well, I believe on the national level, in every situation, on the national level, there'll be set rules and regulations that governs all students in general, but on the school level as well, there will be the rules that are sort of bespoke to the specific school, based on certain core values under which these schools were actually set up. We know the Achimota School was set up to actually change the status quo at the time, where secondary schools was just for either male or female sort of systems that we had in Ghana at the time. And Achimota School was set up to actually bridge that gap of being able to educate both male and female at the same time in the same institution. So already this is a school that, I don't know if we've lost you again. Can you hear me, Christine?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, that's fine. I thought we've lost you. Yeah. So Achimota School was set up to bridge this gap of co-education in Ghana, and that was the beginning of co-educational institutions being set up in Ghana. That's why we are referred to as the pace setters. We set the pace for these things to happen, Right. So we came in to actually bridge that gap. So I wouldn't say we making rules, or we making rules that are against what rules have already been set up by the government, or the general rules that have been set up, but we've just added a lot more. Achimota School has added a lot more to their structures. And in a way, we are accepting certain standards that were not accepted back in the days, and we've also added our bits to it, you know. So fair enough, there could be the general rule set out by the government that governs all other schools, and then there could be the school rules and regulations itself that are just bespoke to the school in itself. Christine, what do you say in respect to that?
Thanks for putting the question straight to, you made my work so easy. So Christine, I mean, obviously, you can throw more light on that.
Yeah, I think what Tessa was saying is really true, that Achimota has set itself apart from other educational institutions right from the get-go, in the sense that it's a mixed boarding school, which is quite unusual in Ghana. Back to your question about what could be considered reasonable limits, I think when we think about imposing limits and conformity on children, we really need to think about, like, what is our objective in this? Are we just having rules for the sake of rules, or do they serve a certain purpose? And I think what's important is to consider, like, when these rules are applied broadly, also what would be reasonable exceptions to those rules, and in which circumstances might we want to allow students to stand outside of those rules. So for me, like, there are two issues here. What does it serve really for educational purposes to have students conform to uniform and standards? On the one hand, from a positive, if you want to look at it positively, you've got an institution now that is trying to educate, keep safe, and raise essentially, large numbers of children, and that is not an easy task. And so the rules are in some ways and to enable them to properly take care of each child. And the more that you can kind of have the children conforming with certain behavioral standards and things like that, the easier it is for the school to manage. So that could be like a reasonable restriction on children's freedom in terms of what they do, where they are at certain times of the day. But I think in this case, we need to really ask ourselves, which if we place limitations on someone's religious expression, that is quite a serious thing to do, and it shouldn't be done lightly. And we have to really kind of like consider whether the benefit of having conformity in a school and keeping kids safe and helping to manage them is worth infringing on individuals' rights, particularly when it comes to matters of religious expression.
Yes, I was gonna, I mean, hold that opinion right there when you narrow it down to because I was gonna ask a question about what autonomy has a school or educational institution has, I mean, on its people, in relation to their appearances, for example, and what autonomy has that educational institution have? Because already, the reason why we have a national constitution that every other constitution has to conform to. It doesn't have to go above the nation. So I'm beginning to find it a little bit difficult. So what kind of autonomy, or what autonomy does an educational institution holds over its people in relation to issues such as appearance, hairstyle, for example? You can take that, Mrs. Mills.
Yeah, I think I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know about where schools stand as far as the constitution is, and where their admittance rules, whether they have to comply. My understanding is that schools are able to apply their own rules as far as admittance of children is concerned. So and this is why Achimota School has been able to refuse entrance to the student. But I think questions have to be asked about, even though the school has autonomy over its admittance, why exceptions are granted for certain students, and in this case that they haven't been granted. Because Achimota School hasn't forced, historically, it hasn't forced white children or mixed race children to cut their hair and to conform with the school rules. But it is in this case conforming. So we have to ask, why are exceptions made for non-Black students? Whereas when it comes to Black students, that that they make this stance about their autonomy and their freedom, when we know very well that they do make exceptions for certain children. And we have to ask, where does this actually come from? Are we still kind of like dealing with this kind of like internalized racism and this colonial legacy whereby Black hairstyles and Black children are seen as needing discipline and the stick and need to be controlled, otherwise they're just going to go crazy, and that Black hair is unkempt and untidy and things like that. We have to really ask ourselves, why is it that a white student, when admitted into Achimota school, is not subject to these same rules? If the argument is made that the school has to have a uniform policy and that's beneficial, why is an exception made for even mixed race children? But in this case, it's not made for a Black child. So I think it raises some really important questions about, where does these perceptions of Black hair and Black hairstyles, like why is it not seen as neat and uniform to wear long natural hairstyles for Black children, but it's perfectly fine for white and mixed race children to do that?
Mr. Tete, I mean,
yeah.
Yes, go on, take it.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say, if I could come in, Christine, I'll be really disappointed if really exceptions are being made for other races and not for Black kids. To be honest, I don't have any proof that this is really happening. I saw some pictures on social media a few weeks back of other races wearing long hair, but later on, I got verification that those were actually exchange students and not students of Achimota school. They were exchange students in the school, So for that matter,
well,
they
Tete,
can.
I looked into this because I thought it was a really important point.
Absolutely.
And I actually verified with friends of mine that have had either mixed race children or Lebanese children, and they confirmed that the boys, of course, were made to cut their hair short, but actually, the white girls and mixed race girls have not been forced to cut their hair or shave their hair short. So, I have verified that that exceptions have been made at certain times for different races.
Yeah, I think that is really disappointing to hear that is happening in Achimota school, for that matter. And I believe, honestly, that we need a strong coalition to enforce change in this situation, because in all honesty, I don't actually believe that any hairstyle has an effect on the child's ability to learn or to acquire knowledge in any school to start with.
Before you establish that point, and I know you've actually hit a very strong hammer on that point about you feeling a little bit disappointed, even in your own alma mater. And I like that coming from someone like you who is really experienced and an international person in that matter.
Yeah, I'll be very honest about it, because I saw those pictures and I was a bit taken aback. And I also tried to verify, and I think my source gave me probably wrong information that they were exchange students. So if you've got the confirmation that really there were other students who are allowed to keep the hairstyle by virtue of their race, I'll be very disappointed, because I already feel disappointed when I see other races discriminating against Black people. So to have Blacks discriminating against themselves, that is not excusable at all.
Yeah.
That's extremely disappointing, to say the least.
I mean, since you were there, personally, and Christine was there as well. What was the rules like for people entering into the boarding house? Because in this boy's case, I understand that he was only rejected because he wanted to be in the boarding house, but then he could keep his hair as a day student. So I do not know, and then you might be able to tell me from your experience as old students how the situation is like. What could be an underlying reasoning for boarding institutions to require its people to basically keep their hair low.
Well, to be honest, it was a bit regimental out there. At the time I got in, that was in '87. The ladies from Form 1 to Form 5 had to keep a short hair. Sixth form, they're allowed to braid. They're allowed to grow their hair and braid. And we, the guys, it was strict to a specific level. And it must be uniform all around. I entered Achimota school at a time where we had punk hairstyle, where we had the short sides and the high top and that sort of thing, But the rules were that, look, you can't have that. Your hair must be of equal level, and your scalp must not even show if you have the haircuts, So it must be uniform, and it must not show scalp or anything of that sort. There were exceptions for medical reasons. Like we had someone who had alopecia back in the days, so he was allowed to get a skin shave, basically, because some parts of the hair was not growing and that sort of thing, So those things are allowed. But yes, it was strict and very regimental. Even the amount of money that you keep in your pocket at that time was specific. It couldn't be more than 500 cedis back in the days, for a week. You can't hold more than, and all these were outlined in our school book and regulations. That's the blue book, our little blue book. That's got our rules and regulations in it. So it was pretty strict, basically.
Christine, I mean, what you why do we even have rules that limit people to keep their hair low? What actually are we trying to enforce here? What do you think will be the rationale behind it?
I think that's the key question, and I think it's something that we really need to examine deeply in ourselves, whether this perception of black hair as unkempt and untidy is actually coming from us culturally, if it's coming from a sort of more practical thing that in a boarding house, you want to prevent like hair issues or hair lice or something like that, or if there are some colonialist underpinnings to this that actually we need to kind of like move away from and break free from. And more to your point about this like educational impact, as I understand it, one of the Rastafarian kids that was denied entry to Achimota was actually, one of the top performing students at his junior school. And, I've seen some interviews with him. He's a very articulate boy. He's a very brilliant boy. He's great at science. I mean, there are schools all over the world that allow children to wear different and individual hairstyles. And there's just no evidence that this has any impact on their educational performance. And I would say to the contrary, that the more that we, force children to fit these kind of like narrow, behaviors, and, the more we force children to conform, we're actually like reducing their creativity, we're reducing their autonomy, we're reducing their decision-making skills, and just imagine, just if we can, a school in Africa, in West Africa, an colony that actually sought to actually heal and redress some of these issues that have been brought about by this kind of like, colonial genocide, where every sense of our culture and our individuality and our Black beauty have been like suppressed. Like, can we imagine a future where schools actually seek to repair that and teach Black students to embrace their natural hairstyles and teach them to learn how to look after their natural hair and to keep it well? And we teach girls how to braid their hair from a young age and to just embrace themselves in their fullness. Like, you know, that's what I really want us all to imagine at this point, where we're raising questions about, you know, what really is the objective, what is served by forcing children to conform, and just to recognize that there is white supremacy at work here, there is colonialization at work here, and that Black hair is beautiful in all its different forms, and we really need to teach children to embrace that, because once they embrace their natural hair, they can start to embrace the brilliance of our culture. And we can only gain from that. You know, children that are more self-confident, that have more autonomy, are actually going to have more to contribute to our society. Ghana has some serious problems
But
that
then
we need to address. So we need creative children.
Yeah, sorry, but then if you look at, I know you've already highlighted a few pointers on some of the devastating, you know, looking at it from a negative point of view, but I was going to ask a question about the impact of we telling people, you know, how do we look at it in terms of pros and cons? Does it has more negative impact than it would have a positive impact? Because obviously you've equally have watched news of some members of parliament who have raised concerns, and even some of them have referred the issue to be addressed in the High Court of the land, so that the Supreme Court will be able to make decisions on them. And some are even going to the extent to say some, you know, demeaning pointers to specifically people who wear Rastafarian hairstyles and stuff like that. But what sort of impact are we looking at here? And even so, yeah, Mr. Tete.
Yeah, I was going to say I could not agree with Christine more in respect to the limitation of their creativity. I am also of the view that, well, if they are allowed to explore different hairstyles, I mean, we can have some brilliant hairdressers actually coming out of Achimota school just because they were there and they were able to play with different hairstyles whilst they were in school. I mean, we have a lot of time at hand for recreational activities. This could be even done in their own boarding houses, where after siesta, there's some good timing before supper time. You know, we can use this time for such creative stuff, doing different things with people's hairdos and stuff like that. That will help build their creativity. So that, I think, will have more of a positive impact than any negativity, in all honesty. And asking about the pros and cons, in all honesty, I don't actually see anything negative about different hairstyles, people being in school with different or creative hairstyles or long hair. I don't, in the first place, I don't see it having any impact on the ability to study.
Does this particular issue has any effect on boy in question?
And on the boy in question, well, it will be difficult for me to judge based on what I see. It will be more appropriate for him to say what sort of impact it's having on his confidence or his ability to actually continue with his education. I am of the view that, well, Ghana is a very challenging system. The law, the law court in itself, it's sort of a slow system. It's going to take quite a while for a verdict to be reached in respect to whether he will be able to attend the school or not, you know. And it could take years, God knows how long, you know. So, I mean, for me as a parent, I will feel like, look, if it was me, I'll cut my boy's hair and let him attend the school if Achimota school is where I want him to be, because a lot of us just sacrifice a lot including.
I think Christine would disagree, you know,
Yeah, I know,
with
but
that point.
I'll
So
wait for her to come. Yeah, I'll wait for her to come to that. But
yeah,
like I
but
was saying, yeah, it
if
would take
so, I
for
think
me.
I'll make Christine's case a little bit easier for you. Now that you've said that, let me put you in that
Yeah.
corner so that Christine can buttress that. But what I was gonna say is that if the court would eventually, let's say the court reach a verdict where they say the boy can go to school. I mean, and then now, from your point, he's cut his hair, so he's lost the hair now, so he has to grow it all over again, and it takes years for it to reach where he's rich now. So, I mean, Christine, what do you have to say regarding what Tete just pointed out? So, do you think it's right for the boy to cut his hair and just go to school, or the school should just admit the boy and even leave the case in the courts for the court to decide? Which one should it be?
I think I understand Teta's perspective, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, this is a young child, and I'm not sure to what extent his education has already been disrupted, but being the center of all this media attention and things like that is not exactly what you want for such a young child. However, I do think that it's important that his family and his parents have supported him to make a stance. Because at the end of the day, this is their religion, and there's a lot of negative stigma around Rastafarianism in Ghana. It's very misunderstood. You know, people's perception of Rastafarians is that they're just people who smoke weed and sit on the beach, or, you know, are homeless, and actually they don't really understand that this is an old religion, and it's a very Christian religion. You know, Rastafarians follow the Bible. Their children are not encouraged to smoke weed in the same way that Christian adults drink alcohol, but it's not something that we encourage our children to do. There's no evidence that this student has just been kind of like wasting his life, and, you know, it's some sort of lazy Rastafarian, as the perception might be. He's actually a brilliant and accomplished student, you know, with his dreads. And I think it's really important that we teach our children to stand up for what is right and to defend their family culture. Because we can't even imagine that this could happen. You know, if we heard about this happening in the UK or in the US or abroad, where Black students were being discriminated against for wearing natural Black hairstyles, I think Ghanaians would be outraged, and you know, there would be, you know, protests, and I think
I didn't want to bring this up, but there is an issue in the Metro newspaper, page 3, top right corner, on about this school in London, central London, somewhere, where the kids have chanted that.
Yeah, Pimlico. Yeah.
They want.
And this has been happening. This has been happening in schools in the West a lot. You know, whereby, you know, Black students and even people in workplaces. So in the US recently, they even you know, have introduced new legislation to combat discrimination against natural Black hairstyles. So this is a problem that is being faced by Black people in white majority countries. But how embarrassing for Ghana that this is happening in a Black majority country. And we really need to start sort of standing up to some of these stigmas around Rastafarianism and Black origin religions. You know,
let's take a spin on the discussion, and look at it from a different type of appearance, you know, where we have in most of our, if you go to the Ghana High Commission here in England, there are pictures of you know, young looking, good looking girls holding pots with pictures, and, you know, they portrayed in natural, you know, whether they are dancing to Adowa or something, you know, they braid their hair in a certain way. You know, we've got all these pictures showcased in places of importance like the High Commission and other museums and stuff like that. Now, the same person can't go into the school with the same hairstyle because they need to cut it short, you know. And even so,
it's frozen again.
I can tell. Anyway, to keep the discussion going instead of waiting, let me continue by saying that, well, I do agree with the fact that, look, we must enforce change. But in all honesty, it's not going to take just one guy to actually enforce this change. It's going to take a stronger coalition to actually advocate for this change and push it ahead. I think the Parents Teachers Association of Achimota School must get involved in this. They must support
but
the idea for change, because in the first place, nothing has been put forward to confirm that, well, children with longer hair or different hairstyles cannot learn or do not learn, or they get impacted, their studies or their ability to absorb information gets impacted by their hairstyles. We don't have any proof for that. We don't have any review or studies that actually supports that. So why is that a rule in the schools in the first place? It just doesn't make sense to me. The rule must be changed, and we must follow the right way to get those rules changed. We need a strong coalition to actually push for that sort of change, and it must be changed. But my point is, I don't believe they'll make this change in favor of this particular boy, because the school will try to stamp his feet on the fact that these are rules and regulations and you must follow it or take us to court. And court issues are obviously going to drag for that long. So as a parent, I will be worried about my child sitting at home. The psychological impact that the child will have in itself will actually wear me down than just getting his hair cut and going to the school. I believe the parents too can be really strong-minded, especially Rastafarian parents, because yesterday I was having a conversation with one of my Rastafarian brothers down here, and he was like, you know what, the dad should go and look for a different school for the guy to go, because he's not going to cut that hair, No,
and he shouldn't. But I think, this question of whether one, there's a really famous quote, and it's like, never think that one person can't change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that has. And just the fact that the parents have taken this stance, I'm sure there have been many children before this that have been forced to conform and to cut their hair, or, maybe Muslim girls that have not been allowed to wear like the hijab. There are all of these issues, but it really does take these individuals that make a stance. I mean, just look at like the conversations that have been generated as a result of this stance that they're taking. So, on one hand, there is a sort of personal sacrifice that is made. But on the other hand, these are the kind of things that will shift us forward as a culture, and start to like really raise some really important questions and discussions around the free, not just the freedom of religious expression and the stigmatization of Rastafarianism, but broader issues around like the rights of a child. And it's been similar in terms of like corporal punishment with children, that generally most parents were sort of happy with children being beaten at school, and it just took those few parents that were like, no, that is not allowed.
It shouldn't happen. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong if I say just the boy can't enforce that change. I mean, obviously, it's because of him that we are talking right now. So he's made an impact. He's made an impact by the stance he's taken. But what I'm trying to say is the stance he's taken may take a longer time to actually make that change happen. It starts with one person. Definitely we'll start with one person, but it's going to take a longer time for this change. Is he prepared to wait? I'm concerned about the psychological effects that it will have on the child, having to sit waiting for this to happen, for this change to happen.
I mean, if I were the parents, I would, if I were the parents, I would be, making sure that the child has private tuition, making sure that he still has opportunities to socialize with children his age. There are many options. And like you said, and I don't think that the fact that they're suing the school should preclude them from attending other schools. I've heard that he's already getting offers of scholarships and stuff to attend other schools. But I definitely think that they should continue in this and make the point. And if, there are opportunities for other Achimotans to support them, that we should do this, because this is really an opportunity for change, and I don't think we can go backwards from this point. I think something has to happen, and this is a moment really for us to kind of like build some momentum about it. And I really like what you were saying about like the evidence. I think you know what is important that Ghanaian schools really think about, like now in very serious ways, like evidence-based pedagogy and evidence-based rule systems for schools, and really look at like what works and what doesn't, because ultimately our goal is to produce, you know, like competent, disciplined and creative individuals for our society. And what are the conditions in a school that are best, you know, going to produce those outcomes? Do we think that excessive conformity and shaving everyone's head and, you know, is the way to do this, or is there a better approach that's actually going to produce? Because what you were saying at the beginning as well about Achimota's perspective of, we've done well so far, after all, we've produced presidents and we've produced all these accomplished people. You know, just think what could be even more accomplished. You know, just think of all the other kids and all the other creatives that actually we haven't been able to produce because we've stifled their creativity during school. Yeah, I think we can always evolve and we can always do much better. And we shouldn't just sort of like sit on our, you know, laurels, rest on our laurels and sort of say, okay, this is the best that it gets. No, we can do better. Yeah.
And
I certainly
let's
agree.
yeah, okay. You want to say something, Peter?
No, I'll wait for you.
So while we've dwelled on that, I just want us to look at the grievance process as well, because I feel like it's something that it could have been resolved internally without coming into the media space just like that. So obviously I feel like an individual somewhere felt that they've got, you know, the control. You know, now you did point out, Mr. Tete, that it's very good that the boys should cut their hair, and that, you know, even though you're talking about the stigmatization, no, I think you did point out about the importance for the boy to do so and get back to the classroom and stuff like that, you know. But
and no, I'm not saying it's very good for him to cut his hair. I'm saying as a parent, I'll be concerned for how this is going to affect the boy psychologically, sitting at home while his other mates that he may have even performed better than them are in school, and he will have to sit at home just because of his hairstyle, you know. And we know what Achimota School is like. I mean, for me, I wanted to go to Achimota School, and so I actually did whatever it takes to be there, you know. And I'll be very disappointed if I hadn't made it in there at the time, because I mean, from my primary level, it was the place to be, you know. So I can feel his pain, you know, as a child willing to attend this specific secondary school. You get what I'm saying? And that's the reason I'm saying, look, sometimes something's got to give. Achimota School, I don't believe, wants to victimize him just because he's Rastafarian. I mean, I may be wrong.
Well, that's what it looks like.
But I don't believe that is the case. You know, they have structured rules and regulations. They are very, very firm about their rules and regulations. And I mean, we who were there knew exactly what it was like. And I believe there must be change, and we must advocate for the change. The Parents Teachers Association must advocate for that sort of change. But in the meantime, this is a rule, you know. So if there is an option for him to actually succumb to the rules, yes, I will do it. You know, I will do it, because I mean, there's another group of thoughts that will say, well, you get to Rome, you do what the Romans do, you know. So if you're in Achimota School, that's what you do, because I don't believe any student in Achimota School will be allowed to wear the niqab or head cover or something of that sort because they are Muslims. They are not stopping them from following their religion. But when you are in the school, you just have to conform with the rules and regulations and dress the way each student is allowed to dress. My disappointment is based on the fact that other students of different races will be allowed to actually have different hairstyles, whilst people of Black origin are then being discriminated against by not allowing them to have their own hairstyle as well. So if that's the case, then that is very wrong. I'll be extremely disappointed at that. And I believe change must be enforced.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tete. I think the school has actually managed this, very poorly, and it reflects badly on the school. I think the fact that they got this advisory from GES initially, at least, to admit the student, and at that point they didn't decide to concede and allow entry, and have turned it into this media circus. And I think it's going to be very difficult for them to backtrack at this point. But I just also wanted to raise this issue of like this slippery slope, because it's something I've come across a lot in Ghanaian society. People have this perception that, once you allow this to happen, then everything kind of like just descends into chaos and disorder. And the evidence is just not borne out. There's just no evidence that once you allow children not to wear uniform, that happens all over the world, that all of a sudden they become like non-uniform in their behavior and rebels. And actually what you tend to find is the reverse, is that the more that you restrict people and that the more that you force them to perform, the more rebellious that they become, the more they try and find ways around the rules, and the more that they become preoccupied with these petty little things. I mean, who cares? It's 2021. Like, who cares about your hair? And the way that you look? We care about the value of what you're saying, about your ability to learn, about your interest in the different subjects. But I do think, like, for this kid, in some ways, I might agree with you that it's almost like a lost cause at this point, because there's been such a media frenzy. I think it's going to be very difficult for the school to kind of turn around and say, oh, we were wrong, and just let him attend when it's come this far. And as I understand it, they are looking at other schools, and I think this is really an opportunity for other schools to step up and say, actually, we are willing to embrace this kid, we are diverse, and really kind of publicize themselves as more modern and everything else. And that's what I would be thinking about if I was the director of other schools. I would be like clawing at the door to get this student to join us, because he's a brilliant student and he's going to do well regardless of whether he goes to Achimota or not. It's not a precursor to success to go to Achimota. And so let me
quickly take a few comments and then follow up on our viewers out there. I think I would like to say hello to those that are watching with us. I've got Mame Amajima Hammond, Sylvester Ata Amwa, and I've got many others that are watching. Your names doesn't appear, but then Mame Kata, Reverend Ambassador Kata, Doreen Kata says greetings to Modest, and I've got Nuruddin Apodo also watching from Norwich, thumbs up. I've got it says Mamiya says I cannot find it. Oh, sorry, Mami. I think by now you have found it because you've managed to connect anyway to give your comment. So that's a very interesting over there. And then I've got Kwame says that's a good one there. Gifty says, what happened to the Equality Act? Individuals' protected characteristics, I think, must be respected. And Apostle Douglas Santi says, greetings, Akora Tete and Akora Christine. Yes, I was corrected the last time because I was speaking to somebody and then I mentioned old girl and old boy. And apparently, Achimota don't use old girl and old boy. Wow, I was stunned by that, honestly.
We are corrupt.
Yeah. That's interesting because, it's just like Adesada will say the only school. No, is it Infantipim that says that the school, isn't it? So you can go to...
No, that's Achimota. The school is Achimota school.
The school is Achimota. So it's like you have to go to the school, so you can be to any other school, but then if you don't go to the school, you've not been to a school.
Yeah, the rest are colleges.
Interesting. Like I really like those kind of things.
I'll
It
miss
just brings a
this.
lot of challenge among students and stuff like that. Yeah, but I mean, it's been great. But one thing
It's
that I
just
just
good
want us,
banter, man. It's just good banter.
yeah, it is, it
Nothing
is, it
malicious.
is certainly.
Yeah.
One thing that I just want us to look at quickly is the grievance process of the school. Now, I think this matter could have been dealt within, in a way. Some people were like, but then when he was giving the, prospectus, the instructions were stated directly on it, and why is he now bringing this up and through the media space and stuff like that? So you advocating for reforms to be done from the school's rules and regulations, but then the grievance process as well, because it looks like somebody isn't doing his job right.
Yeah, well, I would say it's neither here nor there, to be honest, because in this era of social media, things come into the limelight really quickly and unexpectedly. And the parents obviously took pictures of the awards in the school, feeling rejected and being thrown out, and they obviously brought these pictures out, and these pictures actually went viral. And that's what made the media also take interest in the situation. So it's not an issue of it was a deliberate attempt to get the media involved, but it's more of an issue of I think a parent feeling a sense of frustration and wants to vest out their frustration and see what others out there think about it, and it just went viral. Basically, that's how I see it, to be honest.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the school has sort of underestimated the power of social media and have really been kind of like caught out, because this is a very modern thing, and companies and institutions are often like realizing too late that now it's so much easier to find out and to start kind of campaigns around, like, when they have bad practices or they discriminate and everything like that. I think the school, I would hope the school had like learned its lesson now and realized that, we're now in the social media age, and that, anytime you take a decision like this, you really need to have a sort of like a well-managed PR and social media response, because that's what I haven't seen. I've seen a lot of think pieces and a lot of like journalistic pieces, but I haven't actually seen, a proper sort of statement from the school. I haven't seen school representatives appearing in media to actually justify their actions. And I think that it is important that they now look at that and actually come out and say, what exactly are their justifications and what are their reasons, and just to cast themselves in better light, to make it appear that it's not that they're just sort of sticking to old rules for rules' sake, but they actually have like a thinking and a justification behind this. So yeah, I think they've just been caught up.
So in view of that, is it in fairness as far as the reputation of the school is concerned? Is it at this particular moment, does it put the reputation of Achimota School way even below the pecking order? Because if, for example, Precept accepts the students, then obviously Precept becomes the school then, because they are accepting.
You know what? I mean, it doesn't matter which school will accept this child. It's the whole situation has definitely sort of dented Achimota School in a way, negatively. Especially if it really comes out that other students of different races were given better treatment, that would be really disturbing. And so I would say that's actually sort of a negative nail in the coffin. On the other hand, I believe the reason the school has not been out with a statement, as Christine was talking about, is they might be taking legal advice, because obviously it's a big institution. So it wouldn't be as easy for them to just come out with a statement as easily as the parents of the child. They've not got much to lose when it comes to bringing things in the public. But for the school, they must be really careful what they say and how they go about it. And I believe they might be taking legal advice on that. I saw a statement from the PTA of the school in support of the decision the headmistress has taken. And I only think that that's the reason I actually mentioned that. Well, I feel we must have a strong coalition which should be supported by the PTA as well, because I think that'll be a strong force to impact change, you know. So I rather expect a lot more support from them in terms of this, because obviously we all need to understand why we were made to have this specific hairstyle or whatever. To be honest, I don't understand why I had to do it, but I mean, for me, those were the rules and we just followed it to the book, you know. However, I believe change must be enforced, and for that matter, they must push for that agenda.
And I think we also have to like look at, you know, in terms of like the origin of these rules, like the colonial links. You know, originally a lot of these educational institutions were made to produce Ghanaian citizens that actually conformed with British colonial rules and British culture. You know, it was very much, there was very much an agenda from educational institutions in colonial countries across Africa to produce Africans that were kind of like more closely affiliated with British culture, or, you know, whoever the colonial masters at the time were, then with their own culture. So we really need to kind of like examine the roots of some of these things and whether or not we're carrying on this toxic legacy of colonialism, or whether or not we want to start to kind of like, you know, write a new chapter in our country's history, and really start to embrace, you know, more Ghanaian qualities and more Ghanaian culture, and just kind of like separate ourselves and divorce ourselves from this toxic colonial legacy of, you know, perceiving Black hair as being something negative, something dirty, something unkempt, you know, which it is not. And we need to teach our children that Black hair is beautiful in all the different forms it takes. And actually, like that the braiding of our hair, you know, is a cultural expression. And when you look at like the pre-colonial hairstyles of Black women, you know, we had like amazing diversity in hairstyles. We've got such a rich culture of hairstyles. And I think we need to teach our children to embrace that, and move away from this sort of toxic anti-Blackness that is actually, that manifests itself in rules like this.
Right. So viewers out there, we've been talking about the subject of diversity. We didn't go into all aspects of
Bernard,
diversity.
we seem to have lost you again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes. So we've talked about matters of diversity. We focused on Ghana, and we believe that this subject is really, really important for us to discuss here on iTalks. And we are particularly grateful to our guest, Mrs. Christine Fostfet Mills. Wow, what a name, powerful. And then I've got Mr. Tete Pla as well, who have decided to spend their time here with us on iTalks tonight. Very, very important personalities to be had to get your show. But then I would entreat, if you're watching us and you would want to engage them, I think they have rich, they are very, very rich thoughts in their various fields of endeavors, and you can contact them, reach out, you know, and then we'll find a way to connect the two of you for whatever subject that you want to discuss. But here on iTalks, we spend only an hour for our discussion, but then we are right on the hour mark. And I know that there will be quite a lot of stuff that you would want to share, but I'll just give you a minute each to wrap up, you know, because we just want to see the progress. So what essentially do you want to see as far as your alma mater is concerned, and what they would have to do to kind of change the whole perception and make it more positive at the end of this kind of discussion?
I think Christine is frozen. She can't hear. But anyway, for me, I believe we must advocate for the change. I mean, for the change in most of the rules and regulations to be modernized to actually fit in with our current lifestyle and our current situation. We live in a very small global village, and everyone around the world is seeing what is happening at the moment, you know. And it's sometimes very uncomfortable when you have children who come on holiday and will have to mix with other children from different parts of the world who have the liberty of having different hairstyles, and then they come in and mix with our children in Ghana, and they have been compelled to cut their hairs in shapes that they don't want. You know, it's sometimes very uncomfortable for the children themselves. You know, so I believe that change must be enforced, and Achimota School should lead. I mean, we as the pace setters, I believe we must lead in advocating for such changes, and especially when it comes to Black hairstyles. And if it's proven that, well, different races are actually allowed these hairstyles, I believe whoever has allowed that must face the right consequences. To be honest, I don't think it should be right, and I don't think it must be encouraged in our society at all.
Mrs. Mills, please.
I think it's just important for all of us to just consider what kind of society we want in the future, and you know, what are the goals of education, and what sort of values that we want to instill in our children. And like Teta says, you know, our children, they're not going to be isolated in boarding schools forever. They're going to go out into the world. They're going to meet people of different religious backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. And what do we want their position to be when they face this diversity? Do we want them to be afraid of it? Do we want them to be awkward around it? Or do we want them to embrace it and also express their own cultures and their own diversity? I think as Ghanaians in general, we need to stop being so afraid of our children expressing their creativity. We need to stop being so afraid of difference and diversity, because it's a beautiful thing. It adds richness, and actually is the only thing that is going to provide solutions for our modern problems that we face. So it's really important that we think about evidence-based education, and that our educational practices, the rules and regulations in our schools, are based on, you know, producing the best possible citizens for our society.
Right. Thank you so much, Christine and Tete, for coming to the Inspirational Talk Show, iTalks, and we are particularly grateful to have you, and we believe that another opportunity would arise for us to call on you and then hear your expertise on different matters under discussion. And we feel that we are particularly blessed to have you, and the viewers out there. We are so grateful to also have you to join us, and you've managed to share our links and then also with your comments known as well. So we are particularly grateful. You can keep sharing your comments underneath even after this, and then we just want to say thank you once again to our guest, and then we would want to wish them a blissful week, even on a Resurrection Sunday like this. We pray that the very reason of his resurrection would keep you afloat and then push you to the higher excellence of life. And then we pray that, you know, everything would be okay in your families. So thank you so much for the time, and then wish you all the best.
All right, thank you. All right, goodbye.
All right, bye. Thank you very much. Bye, Tete.
Right.
Speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon.